the doctor called me. She's like, you've got to get to Harrisburg Hospital. She's like, we are not able to handle you at Carlisle and you can't go home.
Did you go crazy? Can you speak into the grief a little bit?
The difference between my heart and my emotions. I don't know, the hole was so gaping, and it still is, but I've been able to bring myself to hold a baby younger than about 3 to 6 months, something like that.
All right, I'm super happy to introduce you to Gwenda. This is a friend of mine from church, and she has agreed to come on and chat with me and share about some of the hard things she's been going through the past, it's a little over a year now, right?
Not quite a year.
Not quite a year. So anyway, I like to have people on that can share their life experiences because we as mothers go through so many various things, and I'd like to try to have people be able to share their story. And so I'm going to allow her to share whatever she's comfortable with. So you have how many children again?
I have 3 children, 1 in heaven, 2 still living. Sierra is 5, going to be almost 6, hard to believe.
Yeah.
Raina is 4.
And your last pregnancy, you just want to share like from the beginning and then your hospital experience and kind of your hopes and dreams and how things started just happening, I guess.
Sure. I guess I was going through pregnancy and I had a few things like blood pressure issues and sugar problems, which is kind of normal for me with pregnancy.
Okay.
But in May, we went for an ultrasound, a growth ultrasound. I was 29 weeks at the time. So we went in for this growth ultrasound and they discovered there was no fluid.
Like none?
None. As soon as the ultrasound was done, the doctor called me. She's like, you've got to get to Harrisburg Hospital. She's like, you can't go home. You have to get to Harrisburg Hospital. So
what a shock! Like going in for a checkup and then suddenly you're.
It was crazy. I was like walked out and shakily called my husband and I said, I don't know what's going on, but I am not supposed to go home. I'm supposed to go to Harrisburg Hospital right now. I went up there. They were having a hard time getting really clear ultrasounds. So they were like, they don't see anything going wrong, but for some reason you don't have any fluid. They're like, I guess we admit you. And the goal is to get you to 34 weeks. You may go into labor before that, but we're going to try to keep you pregnant until 34 weeks. But until then, you're going to have to stay here in the hospital.
So when you were in the hospital, how did they feel about it? Like, were they getting your fluids up, or was it still struggling?
It was still struggling. They had me on pretty high IV drip and antibiotics and everything. I was connected to that for like a week. And they were trying to get fluids back up, and it wasn't happening.
How did you not go, like, did you go crazy? Like mentally, just like from being...
Not terribly at first. It was more toward the end that I started to go a little crazy. There was so much happening, I guess, that first week I was in the hospital that I didn't really have time to, I guess, think about it.
At this time, were you suspecting it to be like as bad as it ended up being, or were you pretty... Like,
no,
did you feel pretty rested that everything was going to be fine?
I felt pretty at rest. There's a part of me that wants to blame doctors for letting me be that at rest, because I feel like I didn't really treasure those last weeks of pregnancy like I wished I would have, because there was a certain part of me that was just kind of pining about the fact that it was stuck in a hospital.
But yet at the same time, I mean, that's kind of
if I would have
again, but yet at the same time, maybe it is nice that you didn't have to deal with that too.
I don't know.
Not really.
I go around on that. Sometimes I'm like, I'm glad I didn't know, because the dread would have drove me nuts. But then there's times where I'm like, well, I wish I could have treasured those last couple weeks of pregnancy. There was one doctor that was very brutally honest with me, and he would say about every time, he's like, I don't know what postpartum's going to look like for you and how he's going to survive. Like whether he's going to thrive or whether he's going to struggle or what's going to happen. But then all the other doctors that I had, which I had probably, I don't know, 8 different doctors, all the other ones were like, oh, we think he's going to be just fine and everything will work out fine. So I was kind of, I don't know, going with that, I guess. Okay. They scheduled a C-section for right on 34 weeks for me.
I do remember the message that came around the church chat, but then it was like, was it half a day later or something that it came around again that things aren't good, or was it more like a day? Well,
we knew things were not going to be super smooth when he was born, just simply because he was 34 weeks. They almost immediately intubated him after he was born. He wasn't breathing super well. I was able to touch him and hold his hand a little bit before he was wheeled out of the OR, but they took him up to the NICU. Yeah, I went into recovery, and my husband went up to the NICU floor, see how he was doing and stuff, and they wouldn't let him in. For 2 hours, I believe it was, I was in recovery, and my husband was up there basically waiting for the...
How does that make you feel?
I don't know why, but C-section meds make me fuzzy.
Yeah, I can understand
so
that.
I do remember that kind of feeling a little bit frantic, being like, what's going on up there? Like, because they weren't talking either
Right.
to my husband. So I would have to go look at my book. But I think that's when he blew his first pneumothorax, which is basically a collapsed lung.
Okay.
And they were working to get that under control to keep his oxygen stats up. Finally, they left my husband in, and he took a few pictures. Somewhere in there, they took me to my maternity room.
Okay.
I was stuck there because can't walk. And you're not allowed to get in a wheelchair or leave the room until you can walk.
And the baby couldn't come to you.
And the baby couldn't come to me either. So,
oh, that's a desperate feeling.
yeah, it was probably 11, 12 hours after C-section until I finally was able to go up to his room and see him. He was stable at that point, and the nurse was saying he was a real fighter. Went to bed that night. The next day, my husband and I actually got the flu in there.
Oh, you're kidding me. I didn't know that.
We told the nurse, and they had some stuff for us, and they're like, but you have to be 24 hours symptom-free, which really pulled because we were getting reports that he wasn't doing so good. He didn't have any wet Pampers. His kidneys weren't functioning yet anyway. His breathing seemed pretty stable during the day. It was just his kidneys weren't. Like, we were calling up to the NICU like every hour or two to see how he was doing. And toward evening, we sensed, like, I was having a hard time getting hold of the nurse that was in charge. We kind of sensed that things weren't going so well up there. Around midnight, the doctor came down, and he said, I know you're not quite 24 hours symptom-free, but he said, you need to come up to Emmett's room. He's not doing very good at all, and I'm afraid this is your last couple hours with him, so you need to come up. And he said, if he does survive this, he's probably going to be on a ventilator the rest of his life. Like, he was essentially going to be a vegetable. Like, he might have brain function, but like, he was going to be severely, severely disabled. We just sat in his room for a while. We were able to hold him. Finally, the doctor's like, there's absolutely nothing else we can do. We've tried every blood pressure medication, and his blood pressure isn't coming up. He's like, we have nothing else to do.
How did you just deal with those words? What, were you just numb? Or was it just like hit you like a brick wall?
It hit you like a brick wall. There's a certain part of me that was, at that point, I was just so overwhelmed by it that there was a certain amount of shock. But like, I feel like it hit me, but the full weight of it didn't hit me until later.
Which is pretty normal, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
I would think so. I don't know, but I'm just, from what I've heard.
So,
and this was now how long after he was born?
About 45 hours after he was born. From the time we chose to take him off life support till he died was 3 hours-ish, something like that.
When was he born again? What date was it?
June 22nd.
Okay, so it was about a month and a half after Lexi was born. I just remember feeling so terrible because there was a whole bunch of us that had babies, right?
It felt like there was a lot of babies.
I just remember coming, and I just couldn't imagine. And you had went through all this hospital stay, your family, your husband, and your girls didn't have their mom and wife, and then you lost him when you weren't expecting that, which not that would make it any easier. But then you're recovering from C-section, and you have to go through a viewing and a funeral and meet a lot of people.
That was brutal.
I can only imagine. Because it was just a few days after, wasn't it? Like a week maybe?
It wasn't quite a week.
Yeah. I just remember I could hardly walk through with, like, we came in with Lexi. I just remember it just felt so wrong. Like, why do I have this healthy baby and you don't? And there was just a lot of your friends, right? I had remember, like, a lot of your friend groups were all expecting and... Yeah, I have two really close friends that have babies that were born within a week or two of Emmett. There was, like 5 or 6 different babies from close friends. It was hard, but I was oddly numb to it. I'm actually quite thankful for the babies around Emmett's age because they kind of are markers or whatever. Like, I can see them and be reminded that, oh, he would probably be crying by now. Okay. I'm scared of him. Yeah. I haven't been able to bring myself to hold a baby younger than about 3 to 6 months, something like that. Oh, really? Since I kind of hold babies at a distance, but yeah, I still enjoy seeing them. Mm-hmm. Like, can you speak into the grief a little bit, or is that still a little bit difficult to do? Like, how does one process that? I don't know. And it's so fresh still because it's just been in the last year.
like this happened in the beginning of summer. So I was
Right.
I was stuck in a hospital, like my favorite time of the year. And so there was something odd about coming out of the hospital with this cloud of grief over your head, and being free at the same time. There's something odd about that.
I never thought of that. Right.
Yeah, but probably for the first 2 months after he died, there was this cloud of just darkness, I guess.
You were also going home and trying to get into a normal again, and I'm pretty sure your girls were completely out of their routine and were probably, emotions are all over the place, or not necessarily.
I surprisingly did not mind that.
Okay.
Because I think at that point I just wanted to be a mom again. I hadn't been able to be a good mom to my girls, really. I couldn't comb their hair in the morning. I couldn't feed them meals, and I lost my son. And so at that point there was something very therapeutic about being a mom. Like, I think it could have almost been harder to deal with the grief and the death if I didn't have any other children.
I kind of see that, like, we've actually talked about it with Nolan's mom. So they adopted, and right as they were going through the adoption process, his dad died. And we actually think that if she didn't have the children, it'd be much harder for her to deal with it, because it's been something that she's been able to throw herself into. And so, I kind of understand what you mean.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it was hard, but it was good.
Yeah.
The first 2 months was probably the hardest, but then we went on a family vacation,
Right.
which was so good for me.
I remember we had prayer requests when you were gone that you would have a good time. It was one prayer meeting, I think.
Okay. Yeah, it was so good for us as a family. While you miss the child that you don't have, like you weren't able to bring him along on the trip, there was something about that just was like we can still be a family. Like, I don't know, the hole was so gaping, and it still is, but it was a reminder that we can still have fun as a family.
And you kind of were able to reconnect.
Yeah,
out of the busyness of life too. Yeah.
It was an amazing thing.
We were talking earlier. You said you still struggle to understand the whole grief process sometimes. Sometimes you find yourself feeling guilty, which for me it's easy to look on and say, why would you feel guilty about that? But I can understand the feelings there, even though it's not something you should feel guilty about. But like, I don't know if you want to talk into that or not.
I think there's something about that you want this child to be as important to you as your other children. And so when you feel like you haven't visited their grave in a while, or XYZ or something like that, it's a part of you that's like, he's important to me too. Like, and I'm not caring for him in the ways that I could. Like, I'm not doing good enough. There's a certain amount of guilt that comes with that. Like,
and it's hard to, even though when your mind knows one thing, your heart and your feelings feel another, and it's kind of hard to get the two.
That's something that grief has taught me, is the difference between my heart and my emotions, because they're very different things. Like, your heart can miss something, but yet you can still feel emotionally happy. Like, that feels like contradicts at times, but they can coexist. I don't know if I could have told you the difference between hearts and emotions, like, but they're different.
If you had any kind of advice, which might be to anyone that has gone through the loss of a child, and
I don't know, just realizing that grief is it can't be put in a box, and it can't really be defined, and there's no stencil for it either, because just between me and my husband, the grief process has been very different, and I don't know, learning to give grace to yourself and to anyone else who might be walking through the journey with you, like your husband or your children or whatever. Just being understanding and being graceful, grace towards them and yourself, because it's very different for everybody. And if you don't allow them grace or yourself, you'll just drive yourself crazy and your family crazy. And
That's so true. With Nolan's family, they talked about that different times, how kind of the same thing, almost feeling guilt in certain areas. Maybe their grief wasn't what they thought it would look like. It is so different for every person.
It's not an easy journey, and there's times where I don't know, almost grieve my own innocence, if you will. When I look back and I kind of play the situation over in my mind, like if I was to see one of my friends go through that, like I almost, it's just like, it's...
You can never be who you were before.
No.
Anyway, what were you going to say?
No, you're just never going to reclaim that innocence, I guess. And
so I should treasure it.
Yeah, you should. And I think you actually might have been there in that conversation. Kendra asked me one time, she said...
I think I was. She said,
she's like, she thinks if she lost a child, that she thinks that the fear of losing a child would go away. And I wouldn't say that to be the case, because I feel like I'm even more terrified of it now. I know the pain of losing one, and there's a part of me that my heart knows that there's going to be that hole there. And so if I was to lose another one, it's like grief times 2 in my brain. And so
I wonder if she was meaning more, she struggled so much with anxiety that I think for her...
The anxiety would go.
The anxiety goes when she faces whatever she was anxious about. I wonder if that's more, like if she had to go through whatever anxious thing that, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, there is a certain amount where I know the process. I know if I was to lose another child, I know what is going to happen, so to speak. So there's not that fear of the unknown, I guess. But
it's how much pain can a heart hold?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. How much pain am I capable of? That scares me.
Yeah, I believe it. How did Job do it when his whole family was wiped out?
I've often thought, I just read the book of Job not long ago.
I was going to ask you, are you through the Bible yet?
I am.
Did you make it?
I made
it. Just crazy. I was thinking about it. And Sunday when you were I'm like, oh my word, I'm going to ask her. And that's amazing. I'm like, I was almost tempted. I'm like, should I try? Do you recommend? Totally changing the subject.
Yeah, I think I would.
Okay, if we're still actually rolling here. So you read the Bible through in
45 days.
45? I thought it was 90.
No,
45 days.
Yeah.
How much did you have to read every day?
It was about 2-ish hours a day.
2 hours a day.
Something like that. It kind of depended on how well I was able to focus. Like if I was trying to read when the girls were around or something like that, I found that I had to keep pausing it or whatever. But
now 2 hours a day when you're single is pretty easy, but 2 hours a day when you're a mom, that's a commitment.
It was. I was kind of glad when I was done.
How did you get through all the law and the prophets?
I don't know.
And all the genealogies. And so-and-so begat so-and-so and so-and-so begat so-and-so.
There was a reason why I told so many people that I was doing it, because I knew if I didn't, it wasn't going to happen, because I'm not that self-disciplined.
Yeah. Wow,
but it was something
amazing.
I'd heard different people doing it in 30 days.
Okay.
And then my brother-in-law actually talked about his sister had done it during Lent, which is when I did it.
Okay.
Which is normally around 40 days.
Okay.
Anyway, and so I'm like, I'm going to do 45 days.
Well, that's amazing. And so how did you figure out how much you had to get through to hit 45 days? Did you?
Well, I had a 90-day plan.
Oh, okay.
So I took 2 days for
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Twice. 2 days for a day or whatever.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what I did.
You. Did you retain it?
No, I wouldn't say so, because there's a certain amount. It's. I guess the best way to say it is it kind of you pull out and look at the Bible through bird's eye. Mm-hmm. There's just certain themes that you see running through the entire Bible that you catch, but I wouldn't say you retain all the details about David's life or about
I understand that.
Paul's life.
I just tend to be one that I start zoning, like when I read too long, or if I'm trying, especially some of those heavier. What version did you read?
ESV.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be easier than the King James.
Yeah. I wanted to do something that was a little easier to read, just because.
That's a good idea. I think if I do that, because King James is so wordy that you just have to be like,
You feel like just reading through it, like in devotions or something like that, you feel like you read through something and like, what?
Right.
reread it. Like you
Right.
could never do that if you were trying to read through in a short amount of time.
Right. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, it was a
Anyway.
good challenge, and I would recommend it. But I will say it takes a lot of self-discipline.
I believe it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. I always like a challenge, but I'm not sure. That's a big one. Maybe I'll
Yeah,
have to just-
I think, normally what I would do is I would get up a little bit earlier to make sure I had like an hour. My girls are not morning people. They sleep into 8 o'clock almost every morning.
Okay.
And so I would get up in good enough time that I could for sure get an hour of reading in before they woke up.
Okay.
Which was huge. And then we always have quiet time pretty much every day.
Okay.
And so I could read then or after they went to bed.
Okay.
If I didn't read enough during morning hour and quiet time, then I could finish up
Okay.
after they went to bed.
Very good.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, good for you. Anyway, do you have to get home or should we go for a walk? It's almost 9.
We can go on a quick walk.
Okay, we can get out at the end of the lane.